They wanted me declared incompetent so they could liquidate my worthless pottery. Angela brought the zoning inspector to my barn, her smile sharp as wire cutters. Father's become confused, she told him, gesturing at my clay-stained workbench. These structures violate code. For his own safety. The inspector nodded, already filling out demolition orders. I stood there in my apron, hands trembling just enough, the perfect portrait of a deteriorating old man. What they didn't know, every simple pot they dismissed was worth more than Angela's gallery grossed in a year. The inspector's clipboard clicked with each check mark. Non-compliant electrical. Structural instability. Fire hazard. Angela stood behind him, phone in hand, already texting someone. Probably her attorney. The one who'd been drafting conservatorship papers for 3 months, thinking I didn't know. I watched her manicured fingers dance across the screen, nails the color of arterial blood. She wore perfume that smelled like burnt sugar and ambition, too much of it, the way people do when they're trying to cover something rotten underneath. Her suit was charcoal gray, expensive, the kind with stitching so fine you could barely see it. She'd worn it to her mother's funeral too. Efficiency. That's what she called it. I called it something else. The barn held 43 years of my work. Shelves lined with what Angela saw as hobby clutter. Bowls with imperfect rims. Vases with intentional asymmetry. Each one signed with a small mark she'd never bothered to examine closely, a phantom etched into the base. The inspector tapped a support beam, frowned, wrote something down. Angela stepped closer to me, her voice dropping to that practiced softness people use when they're performing compassion. Dad, this is hard, I know. But you're not safe here anymore. We need to get you somewhere with supervision. Medical oversight. She touched my shoulder, her hand cold even through my flannel shirt. The barn needs to come down. It's not stable. I nodded slowly, let my eyes go distant, the way they do in those pharmaceutical commercials for dementia medication. Gave her exactly what she expected to see. Back in the house, I locked the door and sat at the kitchen table. The surface was scarred oak, older than Angela, bought at an estate sale the year she was born. My hands, stained permanently gray from clay, spread flat against the wood. Steady. No tremor at all. I'd been practicing that shake for weeks, ever since I found the email thread between Angela and her lawyer. Subject line, timeline for incapacity declaration. They'd made a mistake, using my old desktop computer to draft their strategy, assuming I didn't understand cloud synchronization. I understood plenty. The conservatorship petition sat in my filing cabinet, a copy I'd obtained through a paralegal contact who owed me a favor from years back. 23 pages of legal reasoning explaining why Tobias Wright, age 67, could no longer manage his own affairs. Exhibits included unpaid utility bills that were actually on autopay, missed doctor appointments I'd never scheduled, and witness testimony from concerned neighbors I'd never met. Angela had been thorough. She'd constructed an entire narrative of decline, built it like a prosecutor building a case, layer by layer, lie by lie. What she hadn't factored into her calculations was the vault. 3 years ago, I'd transferred 200 completed works to a climate-controlled facility in Connecticut. Each piece catalogued, authenticated, and donated to the Metropolitan Museum of Art under a revocable trust. The paperwork sat in a safe deposit box at First National, along with my will, my identity documentation as Phantom, and a letter to be opened upon my death or incapacitation. Angela thought she was inheriting an estate. She was actually inheriting debt and an empty barn. The next morning, I called Angela and asked her to come by for a conversation. Keep your voice soft, I reminded myself. Let it crack just slightly on certain words. She arrived within an hour, too eager, her attorney in tow this time. Richard Moss, 50-something, with wire-rimmed glasses and the kind of smile that never reached his eyes. They sat across from me in the living room, Angela perched on the edge of the sofa, Moss with a leather portfolio balanced on his knees. Dad, Angela started, her tone oozing false patience, Richard and I have been discussing your options. There's a wonderful facility in Stamford, very upscale, with art therapy programs. You could still make your pots there, in a supervised environment. I nodded along, playing my part. Moss opened his portfolio, pulled out documents. Mr. Wright, I want you to understand this is purely precautionary. Your daughter is concerned about your welfare, and frankly, after reviewing your financial records, I share that concern. Financial records, I repeated slowly, as if the words were difficult to process. What records? Moss exchanged a glance with Angela. Your bank statements, utility accounts, medical expenses. There are some irregularities that suggest, well, confusion. I leaned back in my chair, let my shoulders slump. Maybe you're right. Maybe I have been confused. Angela's eyes lit up, just for a second, a flash of victory she couldn't quite suppress. I felt my jaw tighten, forced it to relax. Dad, she said, leaning forward, if you're ready to accept help, we can make this transition smooth. No court proceedings, no public filings. Just a simple transfer of authority. You'd still have access to funds, within reason. Richard has drawn up papers. I took the documents she offered, let my hands shake as I held them, watching her watch me. The papers outlined a full conservatorship, immediate transfer of all assets, liquidation authority for real property and personal possessions. I pretended to read slowly, mouthing words like a child. Then I looked up at Angela and asked, when would this start? She smiled, a real smile this time, unguarded and cold. As soon as you sign, Dad. We can have everything finalized by end of week. The barn can be cleared out, properly disposed of, and you'll be settled in Stamford by the 1st of the month. I set the papers down on the coffee table. Let me think about it overnight, I said quietly. Just one more night in my own house. Angela's expression flickered, impatience breaking through the mask, but Moss put a hand on her arm. Of course, Mr. Wright. This is a big decision. We'll come back tomorrow, same time. After they left, I sat in the silence and felt something close to satisfaction. She'd just committed to a timeline. Tomorrow, same time. Witnesses, documentation, intent. She was building my case for me. That evening, I drove to Hartford to meet with Catherine Reyes, the curator who'd been handling my phantom collection at the Metropolitan. She was waiting at a corner table in a restaurant that smelled like garlic and old wood, a woman in her early 50s with silver hair and the kind of precise demeanor that comes from handling objects worth more than most people's houses. Tobias, she said, standing to shake my hand, her grip firm and warm. I got your message. You said it was urgent. I sat down across from her, ordered coffee I wouldn't drink, and explained the situation. Catherine listened without interrupting, her face unreadable. When I finished, she set down her wine glass and asked, "What do you need from me?" "Witnesses," I said. "Documentation. I need the museum to go public with my identity as Phantom, and I need it to happen tomorrow afternoon." She pulled out her phone, started typing. "The board has been pushing for a reveal anyway. Your work has appreciated 38% in the last 18 months. A public exhibition with your name attached would be, well, significant. Can you have a representative at my house at 2 in the afternoon tomorrow?" I asked. "With paperwork proving the trust transfer?" She nodded. "I'll bring our chief legal counsel and authentication records." "Tobias, are you sure about this? Going public means the end of your privacy." I thought about Angela's smile, the way she'd looked at my barn like it was already demolished, already converted into cash in her account. "I'm sure," I told Catherine. "Some system failures require a complete shutdown and restart." She didn't understand the metaphor, but she understood the tone. The meeting was over. I drove home through darkness that felt less heavy than it had in months. Tomorrow, Angela would discover the difference between possession and ownership. They arrived at 2, exactly on time. Angela and Richard Moss, both dressed like they were attending a closing, confident and relaxed. I let them in, offered coffee they declined, and we settled in the living room. Same positions as yesterday. Angela started with small talk, asking if I'd slept well, if I'd had time to think things over. I told her I had. "Good," she said, pulling the conservatorship papers from her bag. "Richard has made a few minor adjustments based on our conversation. Nothing significant. Just clarifications." She set the documents on the coffee table, clicked a pen, and held it out to me. My doorbell rang. Angela's expression tightened. "Dad, are you expecting someone?" I stood slowly, made my way to the door, opened it. Catherine Reyes stood there with a man in a navy suit, both holding leather cases. "Mr. Wright," Catherine said formally, "we're here from the Metropolitan Museum of Art to discuss the Phantom collection and finalize public authentication protocols." Angela's voice came from behind me, sharp and confused. "What is this? Who are these people?" I stepped aside, let Catherine and the museum's attorney enter. They took positions standing near the fireplace, creating a subtle wall between Angela and the exit. Catherine opened her case, pulled out a folder. "Miss Wright, I'm Catherine Reyes, Senior Curator. I'm here to inform you that your father donated his complete body of work as the artist known as Phantom to our institution 3 years ago under an irrevocable trust. The collection, currently valued at approximately $43 million, has been in our secure storage since that time." Angela's face went through a sequence of expressions I'd spent months imagining. Confusion, disbelief, dawning realization, rage. "That's impossible," she said, her voice rising. "My father makes pots. In a barn." "He doesn't." The museum's attorney stepped forward, handed her a document. "These are the trust papers, Miss Wright. Signed, notarized, and filed with the state. Your father retained no ownership rights. The collection, the intellectual property, and all future proceeds belong to the museum." Angela turned to me, and I saw something collapse behind her eyes. "You," she started, her voice shaking now, real trembling, not performed, "you knew this whole time." I met her gaze, let her see my face without the mask I'd been wearing. "Every conversation, every email, every meeting with your lawyer," I said quietly. "I've known since March." "Angela, you tried to steal from a ghost." Richard Moss had gone pale, already calculating his liability. "Miss Wright," he said carefully, "if you were aware your father had divested his assets prior to initiating conservatorship proceedings, that changes the legal standing significantly." Angela whirled on him. "Shut up, Richard. Just shut up." Catherine cleared her throat. "There's one more thing. The museum will be announcing Mr. Wright's identity as Phantom at a press conference tomorrow morning. We expect significant media coverage. Given your," she paused delicately, "recent legal actions, you may want to consult your own attorney about potential exposure." Angela looked at me, and I saw the exact moment she understood the full scope of what had just happened. The barn she'd tried to demolish was now historically significant. The works she'd dismissed as worthless hobby projects were worth more than her gallery would gross in a lifetime. The incompetent old man she'd tried to control had outmaneuvered her completely. She grabbed her bag, stumbled toward the door, Richard following. At the threshold, she turned back. "I'm your daughter," she said, and there was something broken in her voice now. "Doesn't that mean anything?" "You're the person who tried to erase me," I replied. "There's a difference." After they left, Catherine smiled slightly. "That was remarkably efficient, Tobias." I walked to the window, watched Angela's car peel away too fast, tires leaving marks on the asphalt. "In electrical systems," I told Catherine, "you isolate the fault before it cascades. Same principle applies to family." The press conference happened on a Tuesday morning, cold and bright, at the Metropolitan's main hall. I stood at a podium in front of people I didn't know, cameras recording every word, and explained that Tobias Wright and Phantom were the same person. Questions came fast. Why the anonymity? Why reveal now? I gave them the sanitized version, talked about artistic integrity and the desire to let work speak for itself. I didn't mention Angela. The reporters did that for me. By Wednesday, 3 separate articles had connected my daughter to the attempted conservatorship, speculating about her motives. Her gallery's website went dark by Thursday. By Friday, 2 of her major clients had publicly cut ties. I didn't follow the details closely. That wasn't my concern anymore. The barn is still standing, reinforced now by museum contractors who determined it was structurally sound after all. The zoning violations Angela claimed turned out to be fabrications. The inspector she'd brought, investigated now, had a history of filing false reports for cash. I spend my mornings there still, working clay on the same wheel I've used for 40 years. The wheel's motor hums at a frequency I could identify blind, a sound that means continuity and control. Sometimes museum visitors come by, escorted tours who want to watch Phantom work. I let them stay for a few minutes, answer a question or two, then ask them to leave. I'm not interested in being watched. The house is quieter now. No unexpected visits, no phone calls from lawyers. Angela tried to reach out once, a letter that arrived with no return address. I burned it without reading past the first line. Some circuits, once broken, aren't meant to reconnect. Catherine asked me last week if I had regrets about going public, about losing my anonymity. I told her no. Anonymity was a tool, useful until it wasn't. What matters is that the work survives, that it exists independent of anyone's attempt to control or commodify it on terms I didn't set. That's the difference between creation and possession. One is permanent. The other is always temporary. People ask what I'm working on now. I tell them the same thing I've always made: vessels. Containers for water, for flowers, for empty space. Simple forms that require precision, patience, and an understanding of how pressure and heat transform raw material into something permanent. Angela never understood that. She saw objects and saw their cash value. She never saw the process, the discipline, the years of practiced control that go into making something that lasts. That was her system failure. She mistook patience for weakness, silence for incompetence. And when she finally attacked, she discovered that the target she'd chosen had already moved beyond her reach. I'm 73 years old now, working in a barn that belongs to a museum, making pots that will outlive everyone involved in this story. The clay is cool under my hands, responsive and honest. It doesn't lie. It doesn't scheme. It becomes what you make it, following laws of physics that don't negotiate or compromise. That's the only relationship I trust anymore. Everything else is just noise, interference in a system that works better in silence. If you understood the weight of the decisions made in this story, join us, hit subscribe and tell me your city in the comments. I want to see how far this warning reaches. You never know who is scrolling through these comments looking for a strategy to save his own life, and your insight could be the key he needs. We tell these stories to build a fortress for the next man. Watch your back, verify the documents, and never underestimate the cost of being right. The truth always wins.